This is a visual effect called sign replacement, and I'll show you the 3 steps here. So we have the original footage. So this is the plate that was recorded. The second stage is we have a clean version of the sign created using what's called cleanup. And then the third part of the effect, we add our After Effects typography. Okay, so the original, just a raw plate. Cleanup, where we get rid of the text, do that in Photoshop, and then they're all pinned back in so that they all look like they're on that sign. Okay, so this is a very common technique called invisible effects, and it's not just used on signs, but it can be used on anything such as building fronts, walls, any kind of surface where you need to get rid of something or replace something. And it's quite often used in period pieces where you need to get rid of modern signage and make the street look like it's old, for example. Okay, so that's the effect. Here is the composition that contains all of the different parts. So we have I'll just put this down to a quarter so we can see it move a little bit better. So we have all of our layers working together. I'll put that back up. Full actually. And we can go through the layers here. So from the top down, we have a couple of adjustment layers, and these are going to be applied at the very end. Because we shoot our plates at a very high shutter speed, we end up losing our motion blur, and we put that back in with our effects. You'll see here, if I pull it around here, you should see it a little bit better. So you can see it just getting that tiny little bit of blur around here and in the trees behind. So I'll switch that off. The next one down is just a basic color correction. So we switch that off, we'll see that we get the image looks a little bit brighter. So that was just to cool it down, darken it, bit of contrast. The next layer down is the text. So that's going to be a separate layer, a pre-comp. Our sign is going to be also pre-comped and tracked back in, and then we have the bottom plate. So we can see it a little bit better if we switch off the background plate and then show that we actually have a kind of a blank version of the sign pinned in using our corner pinning. And we also have text in a pre-comp also pinned in separately. And you'll see the two of them together. So that's what replaces the original signage. You put it all together and it gives the illusion like the text is on that sign. Okay, so that's the overview. It's just 4-corner pinning, some kind of creative use of pre-comps, and a little bit of work in Photoshop using an AI tool called generative fill. Okay, so I'll go into the start and we'll just build it up. So the first part, if you've done your 4-corner pinning, is pretty much a standard. So I'm going to just start it here just to show you how to lay out the attach points and so on. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, go down to my tracker, track motion, change that to perspective corner pin. So as you can see, we have some tracker points here that we're going to follow, and then we're going to set our attach points to be off the corners of the sign so that we can get a nice perspective corner pin where we can pin right out to the edges there. So I'm just going to put that there, move around our 4 points. So remember, you always place the feature region on all of the points that you want to track and then move your attach points. Otherwise, they'll go all over the place. As you move each feature region, your attach points will all move. So we want to try and line it up so that we have the 4 corners just out, making a kind of a box around the edges of the black part of the sign. Now, don't worry about that being off beyond the sign, because we're going to use some masking in our pre-comps to bring our new clean sign in here and make it look like it's just sitting on the yellow part. Okay, so we change our options to make sure that we're set to luminance. Yes, enhance before match. Yes, adapt feature, stop tracking if confidence is below 80. Okay, so we have our feature regions, we have our attach points set. Then we're just going to click analyze forward and let that do its thing. Okay, now I have one here that's already tracked, so we don't have to watch that. Slowly tracking its way through. We have it done here. Okay, so this is the first part. This is kind of the easy part where we just need to make sure that we have a good solid track and we have our four corners nicely sitting out there at the boundaries or the corners of our sign. So the next stage, we need to start working on cleanup. So we need to try and get rid of the text, the original text, and get ourselves a clean version of this sign. Now we're going to do that in Photoshop, but in order to do that, we need to be able to get a frame of our video out to Photoshop that we can work on. Now, naturally, we don't want to have all of the trees and stuff in the background. We just want to isolate our sign. So the best way to do this is to get it to a point where it's at its most front facing. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll make a duplicate of our layer. So we'll just call this one for PS for Photoshop. Okay, and go back to my composition. Now, so I can do a number of things here. I can scale it up just to get it close to the boundaries of the frame. It's at weird angle, so I'll hit W and I'll just rotate that around. Scale it back down a little bit. So get the black parts back in. Now, it's not technically essential that you get the black parts back in, but it doesn't do any harm. So I'm going to unlink these two and I'm going to stretch that out. I'm going to get the V for the move tool. And again, I'm just trying to kind of stretch it as much as I can, get the W back in so we can do another quick rotate. And that is looking somewhat okay. It's a slightly weird angle there. So you can do a couple of things here. I mean, we could get our corner pin or something like that, and we could pin that off just to make sure that you get the yellow nicely framed in there, and we get a nice big frame of video that we can take to Photoshop. Phone on silent. Okay, so this is the first part of getting it out to Photoshop. So to get a single frame into a PSD format, we go to Layer and Export Frame. Maybe it's Composition. Yeah, Save Frame As, beg your pardon, File. So all that does is it opens up our output frame to, and we can just select somewhere to put it. Okay, so I already have a few here, so I'll cancel that. I'll go into Photoshop, and you can see here I have the frame taken from After Effects sitting here ready to be worked on. Okay, now I'll just open up. I might have a finished version here as well. No, I don't. Okay, so we're looking to clean up all of this and we're going to use generative fill to do that. Now, it's a very straightforward process, but as you're working with AI, the results can be a little bit unpredictable. So I'll talk you through the couple of things that might happen and how to get around them. So first off, get your lasso tool and just lasso nice and tightly around the things that you want to get rid of. Your generative fill bar will open up. You click generative fill, you leave this empty and you hit the return key. It's going to generate, it should generate based purely on its surroundings, but as you'll see, sometimes it does some weird stuff and there's an easy way to get around that. Okay, that did it fine. That did a nice job there. Okay, so we'll try the S. This has a little bit more unpredictable results because it's a big object and there's a load of other text sitting around it. So for example, when I did this earlier, it just turned the S into a P. Didn't get rid of it at all, but it was easy to get rid of that. There's an option to get rid of the objects that it puts in and allows you just to keep the clean background version. Okay. As it just did. So turn it into a D this time. That's fine. All you do is you go down, delete variation, and you keep going, delete variation until it's gone. Okay. It's just a quirk of the system. Um, Now, so you'll be doing the same thing basically all the way around here. You'll see what it does is it actually creates layers. So it's not getting rid of anything, it's just overlaying an extended version of the background onto the place where you've selected. So if I solo that, you'll see that that's actually what it's done, okay? So you're going to go around and around all of these until you get the desired result. So I'll just do one more. I'll go down here. This will be quick. So I'll select that. Generative fill, return. Don't write anything in. Let it go through its process, and you should end up with, over time, you can clean up all of these objects in the same way. Okay, so you save that file, you go back into After Effects and you import it. Now make sure that now it's not essential, but it's tidy if you import it as merged layers. Okay, so you want to import it as footage, not as a composition with layers. It'll still work, but it'll just be a little bit harder to work with. Okay. Okay, so we're at the point where we need to start tracking in our newly cleaned up plate. So we start with, taking the sign itself in. We can drag it down onto the layer or onto the composition, and you'll see that it is pretty much the full size of our image. So that's good to go. So we just get our tracking back up, and we have our tracker, perspective corner pin, edit target, our sign, click OK, apply that. You'll see that snaps into the sign. But that's not really what we want, because that's going to give us corners where we don't want them, hard corners. Okay, so what we're actually looking to do is we're looking to work with a pre-comp version of our sign, and we can basically do that just by wrapping that in a pre-comp, and we call this one sign for adjustment. Click OK. We now have our pre-comp. We open that up, and it'll give us a full frame version of our sign. So we can do a bit of work on this now. And first thing we can do is we can get our rounded rectangle tool, and we can just isolate the yellow part of the sign. Okay, so we're going to open up our mask feather, and we'll soften that so it'll blend. Okay, and when we go back out, then you'll see that we have gotten back our original black parts of the sign, and we now have just the yellow where we want it to be. Okay, so this is the cleanup essentially done now. Now we see maybe we've gone a bit too close to the edges there, so what we need to do there is go back in and play around with the rectangle, so we can kind of do it manually, or we could use our mask expansion if we wanted to as well, but this might be a better way of doing it. This is just to get rid of those little tracker points there. Okay, that one's still a tiny bit there, but we'll work on anyway. You just want to fine tune this so that it covers everything that it needs to cover. Okay, maybe we'll just expand it a tiny bit and pop back out. Okay, that's better. Now, so that's the cleanup part done. Okay, so we have our clean sign. Now, from here on in, basically what we're doing is we're looking to add our text on as a separate pre-comp, and then we're going to do some effects at the end to try and get a bit of realism into it. Okay, so we can do the text in a number of ways. I mean, you could even just go into your project, start a new composition, call it text for signage, and background color doesn't matter, so we'll click OK. And we can just do a test just to make sure it's working. So text for sign placement. Now, don't worry about how it looks just yet. We're going to go in and change all this, but we just want to make sure that we have enough text there that we can make sure that it's lining up properly. Okay, so text for signage is now ready to go into our composition. Obviously, we don't want full screen, so we want to go back into our tracking data and get our corner pin back up. We have it there. So edit target. This time we're going text for signage. Click OK and apply. And you'll see that that now snaps in nicely. Okay. So this is, you know, the hard work, you might say, done, right? We have our text, we have our cleaned up sign, and we are now kind of good to go. Okay, so we're just going in now and we're changing this up. We're going to get some new text in here. For example, we can just go, you know, caution. That can be our first bit of text. Get that nice and big. Now you want to get a font that looks somewhat believable. So I think I'm working with Arial here, Arial Black, and I've changed the tracking a little bit. So let's pull that back in there. So that's our first bit of text, and then we can duplicate that, pull that down, and you know, put in some new text. Scale that. Oops, I put in the word letter S there. That's no good. And this one's going to get some basic animation done to it. Okay, now I'm not going to go through the text animation now because it'll take too long. Okay, right. Pop back up here, and that should update. So we have caution, corner pin. I'm just going to actually move this up a little bit more. Just change the size of the text there. Now, reason I'm doing that is I want to have text kind of covering the sign so that we can see how we can adjust it to make it look like it's more realistic. Now I'll go back into the finished version for a moment. And if you look at the last part here, you'll see that the text at the top is slightly lighter than the text at the bottom to match the kind of the way the light is casting a haze over the top of the sign. And we're going to try and replicate that. And then we're also going to try and replicate the kind of the slight sheen or shine that we see on the text here. Okay, now so I'm going to go back to the one I'm working in, and I'm going to go into the text for signage. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a new viewer so that when I go in here, I'll be able to see what I'm doing here, and I'll be able to see how it looks out in the parent composition. So we can do this a couple of ways, but probably the cleanest way is to create an adjustment layer. And we're going to put some curves on the adjustment layer. And we're going to try and make this a little bit bluer and a little bit lighter. So naturally we're going to get the blue curve and we're going to give it a lift. Okay, we can start seeing it come through there. We probably want to put a bit of green in there actually because it's looking a bit warm. Okay, now probably a little bit too much green. Now that's starting to look the way I want it to look, but I want it to happen up here, but not down here. So I'm going to put a mask on my adjustment layer. And I'm going to feather that mask. So I get a kind of a gradual change top to bottom. So it's a bit lighter up here, a bit darker down there. Now, so that's the general color adjustment done. Makes it look a bit more realistic. Now we want to put a bit of a sheen in here. So I'm going to create a second adjustment layer. And same approach here. I'm going to get my curves. This time I'm just going to do a general kind of a lift on the RG and B. And that's fine, but I don't want it obviously all to happen. I want it to kind of come in as if it's just catching across there and we're getting a little bit of a shine that looks like it's on the surface of a metal object with some little bends and kinks in it and so on. So I'm going to do that with masks. And this one is a little bit more kind of freestyle. So we're just going to give that a little bit of here and then kind of coming and going. And then I'm going to get the mask open and feather that one like I did with the last one to make it blend. And you can see now we get a little bit more naturalism in here. Okay, so that is pretty much it, apart from the last thing that we want to do, which is to put on our final adjustment layers up here. Get rid of this viewer here, get that nice and big. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to create an adjustment layer in our parent composition, and that's going to, again, some curves. Now you can use any color correction here, but I'm just going to go with some curves just for a quick kind of contrast change. And you can do any number of things here. For example, bringing down the red will give it a nice kind of cool teal look. That's enough for now. And then I can name that color adjust. And then one more adjustment layer. And this one's going to be pixel blur. And that's an effect that I'm going to apply. So I'm going to go into my effects and presets, pixel motion blur, drag that down there, and we should start to get some motion blur. You can see it on the trees there. That's going to give us a nice natural camera blur effect. Okay, so that is the whole thing in its entirety. Sign replacement. So just show the finished version one more time. So this is where we started. This is after cleanup in Photoshop. And then that's the finished result with some text animation added just for a little bit of pizzazz. And that's pretty much it.